My name is Peter Sprygada. I am ultimately, I run all of our product strategy at Itential. So that involves product development, product operations, product management. Effectively means that everybody hates me. That's basically what it comes down to. But for me personally, I've been doing this for the better part of 25 years. Gosh, almost 30 years now. And I've done that in equal parts in software development and network engineering. I'm formerly trained as a software engineer, went into the networking field, did networking for quite a while, got my CCIE many years ago, have long since let it expire. It really is, I've always had this passion for both software and networking. And so it's really exciting, to see what has happened in really the last 10 to 15 years around this particular topic. So today, we're going to spend some time talking about and I'm going to set the stage for this evolution of network automation, because we believe at Itential that we're sitting right at the precipice of really what's going to be the next thing as it relates to automation orchestration. But before I get into all that good stuff, just real quick, for those of you who are not familiar with Itential. So Itential has been around for about 10 years, a little over 10 years now. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And we really made our mark in the orchestration space. Putting out a orchestration platform for orchestrating network services. Over the last 10 years, we've been successful with that, but it's really come to the forefront that we've recognized there is a difference between automation and orchestration. Now, that can be a bit of a hot topic. It's always a fun one to debate outside of this room over an adult beverage or two. But we try not to get too religious about it. But there is, from a contextual standpoint, we believe a separation of the two. And so we're going to walk through that a little bit today. But instead of talking about products and features, and we're going to do all of that, but we thought to walk you through this one, we really want to walk through what is the reality that we see in terms of how our customers are leveraging both orchestration and automation to really bring new value to their given organizations. And so that's what we're going to spend some time today on. And so it's aptly named Transitioning from Consumer to Producer, which we'll kind of talk a bit about what that is. As we go through this presentation today, I've got one very important request, and it's going to be hard for everyone in this room. So please, do your best, ask questions. Please ask questions. I love to engage in the dialogue. I love to have the conversation. Feel free to obviously challenge, and I know you will, kind of what our assertions are as we go through this. And I look forward to the debate going back and forth. So to get this journey started, we really need to talk about really kind of where automation, has been. So I like to talk about, trace this all the way back to the 90s and what I call the age of chaos. And how many in here can remember writing tickle and expect scripts? Yeah, I knew there was a few of you out there. I certainly have the scars. Net telnet, we all remember. I think I could still write some Perl today if I had to.
Perl, yeah.
Absolutely. Funny little story that it's, we actually still have some customers that use telnet. I will not use their names to protect the innocent, but we actually do have some customers that still use net telnet in some of their stuff. But anyway, really that was the age of chaos, right? We were just trying anything and everything just to try and make automation work. And why were we doing it? Well, we were all getting started in networking. Networking was just really starting to take off. And after you've configured, VLAN 36 name server farm for the 45th time, you start to realize, okay, this isn't as much fun as it used to be. How can I make this happen a little bit faster, right? And so that's really where we got started. But it was, we weren't thinking in terms of software. I don't even think we called it network automation back then. We just simply called it whatever, right? But that's really, when I think about it and I trace, this evolution, that's really was the starting point. But we did learn a lot. What we learned is, let's go back to the CLI. That's what we learned, right? The technology wasn't quite there. We weren't quite ready to adopt automation at this time. But as we rolled from the 90s to the early 2000s, we went from that chaotic age to the age of disillusionment and the element management system. Oh, our element management systems, boy, do we love those things. They were so pretty, we couldn't wait to get them turned on, right? Get our chassis view and go into the chassis and into the line card. And there's my port and it's green and I'm happy and I can click on it and get my form and I can fill. We've got automation solved. We're happy, it's working. I can bring the whole organization into using it. And so I configure my routers and get everything going. And then I decide, well, I'm going to do a quick sanity check, right? I'm going to just go log into my box CLI, right? Just to make sure everything's good. And I log in and, oh boy, what do I see? A whole bunch of cryptic commands. I have no idea where they came from, right? Because the element management system was trying to be way too smart. No mop enabled. Does anyone remember that command? It was, right? That was famous for showing up, right? I mean, I don't know how many times I woke up in the middle of the night, screaming because Resource Manager Essentials is in the back of my head and what it's doing to my network devices. So, during this age of disillusionment, we also learned an extremely important lesson around network automation, and that is, let's go back to the CLI. However, not to fear, the world does move on. It is time to get excited because now we're going to enter the age of hope. And in the early 2010s, we started to see the age of hope, right? We actually saw great tools start to show up that we could use to automate. There was one problem. They weren't built for networking, right? They were built for systems, for clouds. We saw the hyperscalers, right? Sysadmins trying to figure out how they could scale up their servers. But it did teach us in the networking domain that this might be possible. Just maybe it's possible. And so there was a very interesting collaboration that came out of that age of hope, and that was around the NetDev standard lib. And I don't know if anyone in here knows what that is or remembers what that is. That was a collaboration between two networking vendors. You did not hear me wrong. Two networking vendors worked together, Arista and Juniper. They came together, they developed the NetDev standard lib. I was actually one of that developers. I was at Arista at the time, and my co-founder, Jeremy, was at Juniper, and we worked together on NetDev Standard Lib. NetDev Standard Lib was a abstraction that we built first into Puppet, and then we ported it over to Chef and CF Engine, and on we went. It didn't do a whole lot, I'll be honest with you. We had grandiose plans. We were going to take over the world. We had the problem licked. Everyone was going to love it. Abstractions, everything was fantastic. Everything was going to be perfect. It didn't pan out that way. But I think something very, very important came out of that. And that is we proved to ourselves that this is achievable. That we truly can start to embrace automation and start to transform the way we think about working with networks, both from an operations perspective, from a provisioning perspective, and then what we're going to talk about here, ultimately to enter the world of becoming a producer.
I can ask you a question.
Please, absolutely.
So, as we tried to force Puppet and Chef on network element management, was it a push or a pull? In your perspective, like, did we see the age of machines coming, and we said we need to embrace our robot overlords before they take over, or what do you think is the element underneath that?
So, it's an interesting question. I don't know if I ever really thought about it, so I'm going to think about it right now. Okay. I think ultimately it ended up being a little bit of both, to be quite honest with you. I don't know if I could easily quantify it as one or the other. I'm assuming we're talking about from the technology, not the actual how it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
I was thinking this is more like you guys are trying to create the IETF for code, where companies could come together and settle on that standard for the abstraction.
Well, that was part of the idea, for sure.
And then everybody pushes their details under that common and abstraction.
That was the hope. That was the idea. No question about it. That was the idea. Of course, what we learned by that is get a bunch of networking people together and try and ask them to agree on something.
And you get the IETF.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. It's exactly right. As someone who's done a stint in the standards bodies, I did a lot of work in the ISO way back in the day. Yeah, no thank you. That's an exercise in frustration, no doubt about it. I mean, for heaven's sakes, we can't even settle on a subnet mask, right? Is it dotted decimal? Is it CIDR? I mean, come on. But this really proved that it was possible, and I think that's what really took out of it. What we didn't see coming was really kind of the next phase of this thing. So along came the age of progress, and this is where, for the first time, I think we really started to see network automation become something that we could embrace. That was really spearheaded by Ansible. If you all don't remember, Ansible came out. They were an agentless network automation platform, automation platform. They were really built for the server. Yeah. But they were the first ones that really embraced networking. For those of you who don't know, I was actually hired at Ansible. I was the number 7 core developer. I was the one who pushed it into networking. So you have me to blame for if you've done anything with Ansible and hate it. That's all my fault. I will take that. It's okay. But it was for the first time we saw a tool say, you know what, you can do this. We can put real use cases now together, and we can start the transition from being a consumer to a producer, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the other exciting thing that came during this age of progress is we saw truly frameworks that were developed by networking people, right? The great work that Kurt Byers did around NetMiko and still does to this day. The fantastic work by David Brasso and team around Nornir and ultimately Napalm from the abstraction side. I don't know what it is with this industry and why we love our abstractions, but we do love our abstractions. It's that great conceptual thing that no one can ever figure out how to deal with in reality. I'm just being a little bit funny on that, but
dealing with abstractions makes somebody else responsible for the detail.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But what we saw we actually saw real use cases starting to show up. We saw organizations really starting to embrace network automation and do real things. And now we're starting to get excited because we're seeing true progress. What we're actually doing is we're starting the transition from being a consumer to now being a producer. And what I mean by that is instead of just simply taking these tools and using them, we're actually starting to use them to produce value to the organization. And that's what this hypothesis I have is about. And that's what we're going to walk you through today with Itential Stack. The other one I do want to mention, it is important to mention, is that there was also at this time this bit of and it still exists, I guess, to a degree today, right? This mind shift of stateful versus stateless, right? And TLF was really, they're the bellwether here in the stateful side, and they're not the only one. A lot of this came out of certainly the SP world, but TLF was really the bellwether here, and this idea that let's model everything. And that's great when you're dealing with services, but when you need to deal with operational issues, I don't really want to have to model a software upgrade to upgrade the code on my device. And then, of course, you had all the other tools, Ansible, Nornir, et cetera, where it was very stateless based. And, well, that didn't exactly scratch the itch either. So we really needed to think about how do we use both of those technologies together. And I assert that we are now entering the age of achievement. And that is that we are getting to a place with network automation where we can now start to leverage it to bring value to the organization. We can start to actually produce products and services that can be consumed by our customers being the internal development teams, our customers being the internal line of business teams, right? We can actually start thinking in that regards. And that's really where we've been focused at Itential in terms of how we build out our technology stack and really what we're going to walk through today. So what do I mean by consumer? And this is by no means meant to sound like a bad thing. Being a consumer of automation is a good thing. But being a consumer is all about cost optimization. It's all about how much can I squeeze out of my network teams, because we all know networks aren't getting any less complex. They're not getting any smaller. We're not getting more resources. These are really all elements of why I had to embrace automation to begin with. But really, when I'm a consumer of automation, what am I doing? I'm really attempting to take my operational policies and procedures, right? The things that I do on an everyday basis, and I'm trying to codify them, right? I'm trying to put them into code and continue to manage the infrastructure the way I always have. That's really what I'm doing as a consumer. It brings value, but that value is measured more in cost optimization than it's truly in terms of adding value to the organization. When we take that same technology stack and we start to apply it to the idea of becoming a producer, we start to add value to the organization, right? So instead of simply trying to drive cost out of the way we operate the infrastructure, we start to think in terms of products and services and how we can build them and leverage automation and orchestration ultimately to do it. We want to be able to create new products and services. And if you will, and this is a terrible analogy, and I know someone's going to groan when I say it, and that's okay. I'm perfectly fine. I groan every time I think about it. But we want to become, right, just like the cloud providers. But that's what we do in infrastructure. We've got this massive shared resource that people want to tap into. And we can, as producers, using automation and orchestration, we can actually start to do that. And that's really the change that I'm starting to see, that we're starting to see with a lot of our customers about how you start to create value in the organization. So how do we achieve a product mindset, right? How do we go through this transition? Well, we've been talking about automation this whole time, and there's no doubt that's the starting point. You can't get there without automation, right? Automation is really what exposes the capability of the network. But automation is a domain-specific discipline, right? Those who are trying to automate typically aren't thinking about products and services broadly reaching across the organization. They're really focused on what they're trying to do right here and now, right? They're very domain-specific. That is your core team, your data center team, your firewall team, your cloud team, your SD-WAN, whoever those folks are, that's where their focus is on automation. That's where it should be, right? They really want to be able to leverage automation to provide interfaces for other things to consume. But those interfaces in and of themselves are not providing value, at least not yet. What they are doing is they're providing a way for orchestration to start to reach across those islands of automation to stitch things together. And this is how we think about automation and orchestration at Itential. Again, it's not a religious debate, but it is still a good contextual debate. And we can leverage orchestration now as we start thinking about services as opposed to thinking about the network. It's all about, like I said, starting to bring those different islands of automation together. But there's a third component to this, and I think this is the missing piece, and that is we need to start thinking in terms of productization, and this is what we're going to walk through. It's this idea that even though I'm automating my network, even though I'm orchestrating across my network or all across my automations, I still need to be able to define resources and make those resources available that are tracked over time. And this is where the stateful stuff comes into play. As someone who's been doing network automation for as long as I have, I can tell you that if you've got purely a stateful system, you can achieve half of this. If you've got purely a stateless system, you can achieve half of this. I think it takes an entire stack that's working together to provide both stateful and stateless that ultimately is what gets you to this product mindset. In short, both are absolutely necessary to be able to achieve a product mindset and deliver new value to the organization. That's how we get to building a product. This is what a number of our customers are working on, and this is what our customers have asked us to build into our stack to allow them to achieve this type of a product mindset.
Are you going to give us a concrete example at some point?
I am.
Okay.
Thank you for the lead in. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Absolutely. And that was not a paid question, by the way, just putting that out there.
Thanks. Thanks.
To make sure the air clear here. So yes, absolutely. So at Itential, right, when I take those three elements, automation, orchestration, and productization, and I lay them into our cloud product, Itential has built a orchestration and automation cloud product, and it's composed of two components. We've got the cloud delivery model, right, that takes the pressure off of the end user, right? They don't want to have to install servers and manage the UI and deal with all of that stuff. But there is always that concern about, you know, you're talking to my infrastructure devices, right? How do I deal with that? And so now, and if you saw our announcement today, we talk about how we actually do that. I'm not going to steal thunder because it's going to come up in the next presentation and you're actually going to see it. But I can tell you there's an on-prem component. We'll just leave it at that. And we'll talk about it in the next section. But when we think about how we're looking at this and how we actually deliver on this, we're actually delivering at different layers that map to the organizational stack. Our automation, our network automation capabilities are really aligned with the network engineers, the net DevOps, the automation engineers. Those are the ones that are working in very domain-specific areas, right? And giving them the tools and technologies that they need to be able to automate without them having to relearn new ways of doing things. And that's what you're going to see in our first session. In fact, after me, Wyatt's going to come up and he's going to talk a lot about what a journey of that network engineer is all about and how they leverage this technology and actually show you some demos of how this is actually working. This is the product we just announced. Once we've got automation in place, then we start to look at, that's great that I'm automating, but I can rest assured that I'm sure my core network team don't really care what the SD-WAN folks are doing, who really don't care what the cloud folks are doing, but we still need to orchestrate across all of that. So we're starting to see the orchestration architect start to show up in many organizations. And so my colleague Rich is going to come up and he's going to talk a lot about that, about the challenges, who this person is, where they came from, why they exist. I can tell you they're all old people like me. That's what they are. They're the ones that have been around forever. They're the ones that know why that router that's got a 7-year uptime that nobody knows any idea what it does. They just know if you turn that thing off, the whole company goes to hell, right? Those are the ones. He's going to talk a bit about that and really kind of walk through it. And then in the final bit, how we bring it all together around productization with our stack, Dan is going to come up and he's going to play the role of a product manager. And this is the new role that we're starting to see really amplify in many of our customer accounts. right? It's that product manager who's starting to think in terms of products and the definition of a product and what it takes to deliver a product, an infrastructure product that can be consumed by the application developers, right? The application development teams do not want to go and talk to all the network teams, right? There's not an application developer in the world that wants to go talk to the core network guy and the security guy and the load balancer guy and the cloud guy and the SD-WAN guy. Don't want to do it. They just want to take a service. So what we plan on doing today is we're going to build a service. We're actually going to build one right here today over the next 3 sessions. We're going to call it Secure Access Cross Connects. We're going to build a Cross Connect service just for fun. But it really demonstrates how these 3 roles come together in our technology stack to ultimately achieve a product mindset. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way. That's enough.